Today, we're diving into a really alarming story coming out of America's heartland. It's a story of sickness that seems to be woven right into the landscape itself. We're going to use Iowa as a case study to investigate a growing cancer crisis in these agricultural communities and the incredibly difficult search for answers. Just imagine hearing those words from your doctor. It is such a chilling response to a life-altering diagnosis. But for one Iowa couple, that was their reality. And that one single sentence, wow, it just perfectly frames the central question we're exploring today. What on earth is happening in farm country? All right, so first up, a calamity in farm country. Before we even look at the data or the scientific studies, I think it's so important to start on the ground. We need to hear from the people who are living this reality every single day, the ones who see it not as some abstract statistic, but as a tragedy that's unfolding right in their own backyards.
Yeah, these are not abstract figures. A local nurse, Maureen Horsley, she can name 20 neighbors and friends off the top of her head. Nick Shutt, who's lived there his whole life, counts 17 members of his own family. And then there's John Crabtree, who looks at an old family photo and points out that nearly half the people in it have been lost to cancer. This is a deeply, deeply personal crisis.
And this observation from Nick Shutt really captures that shared sense of loss. It's more than just individual grief. It's this community-wide feeling that something is fundamentally wrong, as they just watch friends and family being taken away from them far, far too soon. Okay, part two, the alarming numbers. So this isn't just a feeling people have, or some tragic string of coincidences. The hard data, it actually confirms the community's worst fears. So let's take a look at the numbers behind this crisis. So let's start with just one place, Palo Alto County, Iowa. Their 5-year cancer incidence rate is a staggering 658.1 cases for 100,000 people. To put that into perspective for you, that number made it the county with the second highest rate in the entire United States. And just look at this chart to see how stark that number really is. You compare it to the national average of 442, Palo Alto County's rate is nearly 50% higher. That is a massive statistical difference, and it really highlights the scale of the problem in this one rural community. And this isn't just happening in one county. If you look at the whole state, Iowa has the second highest cancer rate in the entire nation. But what's even more concerning, while cancer rates are actually falling across most of the U.S., Iowa is one of only 2 states where they are actively rising.
So the huge question is, what's going on here? What could possibly be driving these numbers? Well, for many residents and a growing number of experts, the search for a cause leads directly to the land itself and a tide of pollutants from the state's defining industry, agriculture. This timeline suggests a really powerful correlation. So industrial farming methods, they really ramped up in Iowa back in the 1980s. The use of herbicides like glyphosate on row crops like soybeans just skyrocketed. Then, around 2013, cancer rates began their steady climb. And that gap, that roughly 25-year gap, aligns almost perfectly with what scientists called the cancer latency period, which is the typical time between being exposed to a carcinogen and when the disease actually shows up. So researchers are looking at a few key suspects here. First, of course, are the herbicides and pesticides used on all those row crops, with the weed killer glyphosate being a major focus. Second, nitrates from fertilizer runoff, which have been found in drinking water and have been linked to various cancers. And third, other toxic compounds that come from agricultural waste. As Des Moines oncologist Dr. Richard Deeming puts it, yeah, these chemicals have improved crop yields, but we have to ask, is there a downside? And that question is right at the very heart of this crisis and the intense debate that's surrounding it. Okay, Section 4, the science in question. Now, if the link between farm pollutants and cancer seems pretty plausible, you might be wondering, well, why is it so hard to prove? And why is the science itself so fiercely contested? To understand the controversy, we have to start with this key term, ghostwriting. It's basically the practice where a company secretly writes a scientific paper that, just so happens to benefit its product, and then it pays academics to put their names on it as authors. This makes it look like it's independent, objective research when it's not. And that brings us to this one, highly influential study from the year 2000. It concluded that glyphosate posed no health risk, and it got cited in other research hundreds of times. But here's the problem. In 2017, court documents revealed that employees of Monsanto, the company that makes glyphosate, had actually written it.
And even with that bombshell revelation, it took the scientific journal a full 8 more years to officially retract the paper.
And internal documents also show how the industry worked to shape this whole scientific narrative. This slide right here shows a company PR plan from 2015, and the title, Orchestrate Outcry with IARC Decision. The crazy part is, it was drafted a month before the World Health Organization's cancer agency had even released its finding that glyphosate was possibly carcinogenic. And here is the smoking gun. This is an internal company email, and it was unearthed in a 2017 court filing. It openly discusses the ghostwriting strategy, saying, "Recall that is how we handled Williams-Croson-Monroe 2000. I mean, it's a direct admission. So this creates this fundamental conflict. On one side, you've got the regulatory agencies, who often rely on unpublished studies submitted directly by the manufacturers. And on the other side, you have independent, peer-reviewed science that has found links between these very same chemicals and serious health problems like non-Hodgkin lymphoma and DNA damage.
And that brings us to our final section, seeking answers and accountability. So when you're faced with contested science and rising cancer rates, what do? Well, the communities in Iowa, they are not waiting for an answer. They're organizing and they are demanding accountability for themselves.
And they've had some major victories. For example, residents successfully defeated a recent bill that they called the Cancer Gag Act. It was backed by these huge agrochemical corporations and would have made it way harder for Iowans to seek justice in court for illnesses linked to pesticides. Iowa resident Brenda Brink just powerfully cuts right through the corporate messaging with this quote. The industry claims it's all about protecting agriculture, but she says they're not protecting the very people who are the backbone of that industry, the farmers. And this fight is continuing on so many fronts. There are ongoing lawsuits that allege a direct link between Roundup exposure and specific cancers. Scientists and local groups are calling for more independent research. The Iowa Cancer Consortium is now investigating these environmental links, and advocates are pushing the EPA to reassess the safety of chemicals based on the latest science, not on old industry studies.
And so all of this, the personal stories, the alarming data, the contested science, it leaves us with one final critical question. When an entire community's health is at stake, but the science is mired in corporate influence, who is responsible for finding the truth?